Hello, everyone. Welcome to what I would consider to be one of the most fascinating titles I can speak on. God's unknown presence in the conscious psyche. And I thought of giving a commentary on what I consider to be, in quotations, spiritual or religious or unknown experience. What is up with that? Why is it that human beings on this planet that we're living in have some sort of relationship with their inner realms to some sort of ultimatum of intelligence? These are questions required to be asked by the human being because now more than ever the landscape is changing quicker and quicker, and even in the inner realms as waves of information change the shape of the ice. So I remember I was listening to this gentleman on YouTube. His name was, I could be getting the name wrong, but Dan Barker. And Dan Parker. This gentleman was an religious person, a very person who would go door to door in the Christian tradition. And he would go door to door and try to bring people towards the truth of his mind. And what happened was that he stepped out of the simulation of his psychology. Now, he, of course, I should speak generally. I shouldn't speak too specifically, but pretty much there was a gentleman who was under this gentleman experienced like the holy presence of the moment, and they could feel energy or something like that. Then there was a complete pancake flip, and so it was as if a theistic childhood and an atheistic adulthood, you know. And the reason I'm sharing this is because there I noticed that it's as if people are having a personal interaction with an intelligence of their own, with the intelligence of their own side. So it is important to wonder about this, that are there two levels of experience? Is it just the outer realms, or is there another layer of experience over the layer of experience we see? And what is the implication of this? And really, Carl Jung is like, every philosopher is like, yo man, thanks for being here. Carl Jung, when asked about God, shares a quote from The Alchemist. The quote says, God is an infinite sphere, the center of which is everywhere, the circumference nowhere. And so this sentence, I feel, is enough to show the relationship of whatever classification of intelligence we want. But certain words have to be shined first. We should shine a light on them. First, the idea of God. The idea of God, you can say, regardless of the language, there was this atheist, incredible writer named Voltaire. And Voltaire said, even if there was no concept of God, it would be necessary to create him. And I was thinking for a long time, why? That means the whole point of the idea of God is that man can't create it. Man is not in the driver's seat. But I thought about why it was necessary to keep man out of the driver's seat. That means it's as if, is God playing hide and seek with himself through a species, or is there more? Is there certain, is there a hidden geometry at work? So anyways, Voltaire, this a French writer. He said God, it would be necessary. Then I thought about this idea to a more deeper level, and guys, I laughed. Not in a way, in a derogatory way, to laugh at something. I laughed at myself. Because I realized it is such an easy leap. Just think about it. A person asks, where am I from? People. Okay, I came from people. I'm a person, I came from people. Now the person looked at the cosmos and was like, yo, did this come from a person? Do you see, it was in some sense what I consider the religious attempt to be is the personification of the universe. It was the first phone call to a cosmic self. What does that mean? That means it was the effort of human beings making the universe more human. And you know, on one level, it's like I get a bit emotional. Why? Because it's as if you have to let the children play, regardless of their mistakes. So the idea of God is the personification of all that is to the individual. Now the issue is so many wars, so much waste of resources and human lives over what? Over precision of inner realm structure over the outer realms. It's so hilarious that there has been so many wars, but when you ask who has fought in these wars, who is it that's been starting these wars, and you see it is just a temporary movement before it becomes completely leaves the picture. It is just hastening the process, I would say. So anyways, if we drew a circle, the center would be God. What does that mean? It's the causal position. The causal position relates to any sort of effect. That means if you just look at the idea of the universe being a causal intelligence, then it's like, what is the human being doing here? It's like the universe is moving itself. We're just kind of like, the aftermath, I would say consciousness, the center of consciousness, is very complex to, in some sense, perceive as devoid of life. What does that mean? Life is its own God. I would say God is not life. Life is God. This is my personal opinion. Why? Because where are the gods standing? That means if you're a person of a religious background, where is God? The ultimate question. Where is the center of the movement of the universal sector? Where is the world turning? Now, I forgot to mention something. So, see, God is the personification of the universal sector. Then we go to the psyche. I got to explain the psyche. The psyche, we find the word psychology. This is one of the most hilarious things that has happened on this planet. One of the most funniest, I would say. You want to know humor, just go look at the definition. The word psyche means spirit. Do you believe that? And psychology is, modern psychology is perfectly pushing that word aside. That means it's like we should change psychology into a different name. It shouldn't be called psychology if it's denying the very essence of its name. The psyche, or is the derivation? Hold on, guys. There we go. The etymology. The basic meaning of the Greek word psyche was life. Although unsupported, some have claimed it is derived from the verb to blow. Derived meanings include spirit, soul, ghost, and ultimately self in the sense of conscious personality. I would say, guys, it was the notion of the soul. Why? Because in ancient times they perceived it that way. That means unless... it's like even, I'm telling you, there's a reason Carl Jung's references of what he talks about led to the ancient times. I would say Carl Jung, through his work, built a bridge to the past, to the ancient past. He kept the ancient past alive in underneath the modern modern thought. But anyways, the idea comes from soul, and it's very obvious that really you gotta ask yourself, any person alive, you can ask yourself, what should human beings do? What can human beings do on a rock in the middle of nowhere? Either they're identifying as physical creatures going on physical journeys, playing physical games with the universal space, in the universal sector, or the person considers them to be non-physical. But the interesting thing is, at the moment you become non-physical, there is no individual. So that means technically you can't be in the driver's seat, but that also means you're technically not in the passenger seat either. These yogis tried really hard to be nothing, guys, But, anyways, it's the study of the unknown mover. Call it the prime unknown mover of the moment. Whatever. Some traditions, they call it the unknown witness. For me, I perceived it in the name even Mr.Within, that the idea of me being a person is actually qualia. My subjective experience is very personal to me. Very few people, unless I vocalize it, notice it. Maybe my twin brothers kind of noticed it sometimes, But I would say when it comes to my outer realm, object-based existence, if you ask yourself, how do we know that we know, is because there is something to know. But when it comes to matters of the invisible denominations of intelligence, I would say it's trust in the unknown behind your eyes that changes the concept, the context to how you're being a concept in front of your eyes. That means we have been thinking we're just a person. Just a person that can see itself in the mirror, and that is enough. But each person has a presence, and each presence is in some sense an energetic sphere, proximity, I can say that in my own experience, in my inner realms, I have had moments where I have felt like the ultimate effect of an unknown source. I have felt kind of left in the moment. I can tell you my mind has abandoned me in certain moments of my life. But in some sense, when the mind abandons the person, the body has to meet the soul. And that's That's very interesting, because you know how we have the same kind of comfort and certainty that we're physically existing. The only reason we're comfortable right now in the moment is because we have accepted the moment. And so, because it's not, we have declared the comfort based on the conscious opening to the life, you know. But if the person midway through their conscious opening to this life realizes that their position, you see, there's a position to your body, but then there's a position to your mind. The position to the body, there isn't that much free, I mean, there is a little bit of free will, you can move around, but pretty much nature, the world is moving, the biological program. When it comes to the psyche, or matters of the viewer within, that viewer within is attributeless, therefore untouchable by conception. Yusuf says, in the chat section, what if the power that generates the universe is an evil power in its I don't know what you're trying to say that. You say, what if the power that generates the universe is an evil power in its essence? I feel you're trying to say, in a sense, maybe you're trying to say. Interesting to think about. Let me tell you, good and evil are tip of the iceberg. They are old. They are archaic systems. Now the only way I will, at least I am open to hearing people talk about good and evil, it's you better, excuse my language, but multidimensionalize the shit out of it. You know, because good and evil, just duality, it's like how long? How long just endless fingers pointing to right, wrong, this binary morality, denying us of the greater ways that our eyes can move. It's the tip of the iceberg, all duality. Everything you think you are as a person is just the tip of the iceberg. And I will tell you, the only wisdom on this planet is to realize that the tip of the iceberg is not the only. And if you have done that, then I would say I can high five Socrates. Anyways, we have been, I mean, I say we have been, but I feel the species has committed this error. We have held language too closely to our eyes and now can see nothing else. But there is so much more. I would tell you honestly, if I was to say, I have experienced moments where I have not moved my attention and energetic relationship with myself has moved beyond the human framework. Not non-human, not other entity, it has become geometry. That means I have reverse conceptualized myself many times. So anyways, guys, at the beginning I brought up a gentleman named Dan Barker. Dan Baker. Sorry guys, I don't remember the exact name. I just know the first name was Dan. But anyways. Dan said at the beginning of the episode I was talking about this man. He said that he had an experience of the divine, then he realized there was nothing there. You know, that means imagine a child being told to live in a certain way, Now imagine that child realizing that way is not the only way. As if somebody told you in this life you can only move left. And your whole life, whatever situation you've come to, you've only taken the left crossroads. Suddenly, after eons, you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Does that mean I could go right if I can go left? If I have the ability to go left, can I go? Can I have the ability also instantly to go right? You know. I want to say that there is this idea, I call it the inner realms and the outer realms. Many different continental philosophers have given this relationship, this portal between the language of experience and the physics of existence. Carl Jung designed the map in the sense of the idea of the conscious and the unconscious. I will show a picture here. There we go. So guys, this is, you can say this is the view, this is a map. Carl Jung was a very rare human being who managed to draw a map for this relationship again of the subjective language with the objective existence. So we start off being at literally like the center of a coin. Every person listening to me right now, if you're a human being and you're conscious, you're most likely experiencing this, where you feel like a candle in a dark room. That means you don't know everything about this universal sector, but there's a certain range that is accessible to you. And it depends on your location. If you're sitting in a small room, that's your world for you. If you go outside, that's the whole world for you. So really, the world is based on how the attention navigates and pilots. But Carl Jung, he spoke about this notion of four major archetypes. And the four major archetypes, I would say, we have the persona, we have the shadow, we have the anima animus, and then we have the self, the actualized self. That means after everybody has climbed Maslow's pyramid and in some sense come to a point where all their physiological desires of the realm, not desires, but needs, physiological needs for the realm have been satisfied, then they begin wondering, hold on, I've managed to maintain living as a biological body, now what else is there? What about the software? You see, science gives us an incredible attention to the hardware of the human phenomena, you know? But when it comes to the software and the applications that are running in the psyche, these applications are really based on different ranges, as if the person's mind is actually not like a room, it is like antenna signal, as if like when you're in the parking lot, there's only one bar of signal. When you go on, you know, I don't know, let's say you're in the second level of the parking lot, you have one bar of signal. You go to the first level of the parking lot, you have 2 bars of signal, then you come to ground level. And when you come to ground level, you have 3 bars of signal. I would say it is also the same in the mind. Now, those bars, those phones and bars, let's say, They are the relationship of the conscious with the unconscious. And Carl Jung says, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and call it fate. That means technically man is not at war, but we have this idea of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so what is the enemy to the human mind? And at first we're using the idea of enemy, but it is not just the enemy, it is the notion of time. Is the notion that the unknown stands to all the knowledge the species has allocated. Right now we are fragmented. The armies of mankind are lost in themselves. But when an advanced civilization is ushered, it becomes an effort of skill. That means no longer the idea of jealousy, envy, hate. They are inferior emotions. Man is looking celestially now. And so the initiative is not really there was a president, American president, who said, don't ask what your nation can do for you, but what you can do for your nation. I would say now we've reached a point where we're not asking any of those. Now we're asking what members of the species can do for the whole species. For the first time, a conscious effort of 8 billion human bees to build the hive mind. Now this hive mind has to, right now, we are not here to see the ending. We can imagine, talk about dreams of the future, but what in 2020 we are here for is to prepare the backup systems for the cyberspace simulations to come. That means the more we can advance the users of technology, the less the users of technology in the future generations are going to be dominated by the technology. So what does that mean? That means for the first time we have to care for the collective unconscious, which is, I'm saying it poetically, the enemy of my enemy. That means we are all here, regardless of how human beings have a relationship with human beings are having a relationship with the world. If they can all look at their world and be like, oh my God, weird place, we're all on a rock in the middle of nowhere, what do we do? If we can get to that point, I would say that is the base. That's the basic. That is platform 1. The species notices its potential. Skill, competence become the leaders of mankind. That is it. Personality, emotions, they are valuable, but they are valuable in their own place. What that means is there's certain moments in life, just like piloting, where you got to look at where the plane of existence is, what is coming towards the plane of existence, what storms are ahead, what clouds that need to be dodged, what clouds that you need to, in some sense, are okay to go through. So what does that mean? Once the responsibility is taken to the experience, the direct experiencer within, for the first time, language doesn't become your teacher. Then you see the value of the human. For me, poetically, I would tell you, it was as if like bursts. It was like lightning strikes. It was as if when it comes to how my inner realms opened up, it was events. It was literally as if, do you know what it is? In some movies, in some shows, the character has like this weapon, the sword, and the character moves the sword in the air as if he's slashing the air, but from that slash comes a wave. That means it's like a kind of like a, let's say, magic sword, where the moment you move it, it slashes a wind. Imagine Kung Fu Hustle, the guy playing the strings, you know? It honestly feels like that. It feels like the world has something to say, which the moment I wake up, I notice it. I notice the world starts speaking in your ear. Not in the in the inner realms. I mean, literally, information overwhelms. And let me tell you, the philosopher is the person in the ship. Imagine a ship where 8 billion human beings are on and it's in the middle of unknown waters. The philosopher is the one who's wandering beyond paradise. I would tell you philosophers are rebels of the mind's limit. And the mystics were rebels of the soul's experience. That means I stand humble. I am on the shoulder of giants, trust me. Do you know how many advanced communicators before I was born roamed this earth? There is a collective project where attention is allowing the universe to move in new ways. The mystery of human experience and a relationship with either an invisible other, an invisible self, or an invisible world, through intuitive trust, one will recognize the invisible self, the invisible other, and the invisible world are one moment. It is in front of your eyes that self, world, and other is separate. Behind your eyes, there is only watching, unknown watching. And if you don't fear the unknown witness that you are, for the first time, knowledge will salute you. The knowledge of the realm. It doesn't matter if it's a language, if it's a word, or if it's a word in an inner realms animated into a being. That means, I'll give you an example. Like if somebody says the word centaur, you know, this mythical creature, in the inner realms instantly it becomes a creature. Or a minotaur, I could imagine like suddenly somebody playing flute in a labyrinth, you know. So it becomes a relationship with the invisible as the same. I played with the invisible. 2014 to 16, I would say there was a mystery. The divine was a mystery. Then afterwards, it was as if like the divine no longer was the point of divinity. I noticed that there is one thing that many religions point to, but none of them got it. And is that the idea revelation. Not what is the revelation. Forget the content, but the idea that there is something to be revealed. That we are here thinking we're just atoms in the void. And it's meaningless. But there is something left. You know? There's a story. There's the sage. He has been in the forest for so long, he has found inner peace. His inner peace has become unconditional, and the moment your inner peace becomes unconditional, the universe moves itself pretty much. You don't have to do much. The universe does everything. But I'll tell you, the sage sits there in the middle of a forest, and he just sits there, and he is with his world, as if he has come to see an old friend. The poet Hafez says, your heart and my heart are very, very old friends, very old friends. So this sage cultivates inner peace, and he suddenly opens his eyes one day and sees there is 500 disciples in front of him. Guys, this is a Zen story, brother. One of the disciples, in all the events, all these 500 people have come to the forest, and they're all sitting there cultivating inner peace. One of the disciples is always smiling, to a point where everybody calls him the smiling disciple. And all the other disciples are like, yo, man, how's this guy smiling? We're all going through this, intense noticing process. This guy's just smiling all the time. How's this guy smiling, That means when you smile in a sad world, you are the stranger. Suddenly, one of the disciples gets up and shouts, "Winter is coming!" And actually winter is coming, and the sages, they don't know what to do, and suddenly out of nowhere the king realizes there is an enlightened sage in the forest, and he invites all the disciples, the 500 disciples and the sage, to come to his palace during winter, and they will have rations and whatever, you know. And so the king that invites all these people, the sage accepts all these people who had gone to 500 plus the sage who had gone to the forest to cultivate peace. They all come into the palace. Winter time has come, and the king is a king who's so burdened, where he has to, in the council, make sure who's in line and who's dishonest and who's honest. You know, the king had kind of problems on that level. Then the king would come home, and all his wives would try to forward their prince or something, as the story said. And the king had so many problems that he wanted like some sort of wisdom from the sage. Now the thing is, the whole time that he's invited the sage to come, he's so busy he hasn't had time to come and actually meet the sage that for the whole winter was in his kingdom. So what this king does is, on the day where they're all, winter is over and winter is has left, the king suddenly on the last day comes and sees the sage about to leave and says, "Sage, you are an old man. Stay in my kingdom, be my counsel, and send your disciples to the forest where they need to be. You know, but you are old, and it serves you to come and help your world." And the sage thinks about this and says, "Okay." And he looks at the smiling disciple where he was very fond of. And only, by the way, the sage knew why this disciple was smiling. None of the disciples knew why the disciple was smiling. The sage, um, the sage tells the smiling disciple to lead the rest, and the smiling disciple takes the rest of the disciples and goes to the forest. Now, what happens is, years pass by, and the smiling disciple and all the disciples in the forest are cultivating peace, inner peace, and acceptance of the nature of the realm. One day, the smiling disciple comes to meet his old master, the sage. And he comes and sees the sage as an old man sitting in this kingdom. And the smiling disciple sitting there, he's seeing the sage, and the sage is peaceful too, you know. This is in the king's palace somewhere. And imagine they're sitting on the king's, like, you know, throne, just chilling. But no, I won't ruin the story, let me tell you. What happens is that the smiling disciple sees his old master and sees that he's getting old and says, "Oh, what happiness." Not as a response to him getting old, but he just looks at his teacher and he says, "Oh, what happiness," as if like he has found happiness. And the sage is smiling, and the whole time as the sage speaks, you know, this guy is sitting there, "Oh, what happiness, oh, what happiness." And now suddenly the king walks into the room. And the king sees the smiling disciple sitting there and this old sage sitting there, you know. And the king looks at looks at them and sees that the smiling disciple is suddenly saying, "Oh, what happiness! Oh, what happiness!" And the smiling disciple didn't stand up to respect the king. Imagine being in a king's palace but not acknowledging the king. The king gets offended. He looks at the sage and he says, "Your disciple, it seems that your disciple has sat so much doing nothing that he has become a fool. He's gone crazy and he's just saying, oh, what happiness, with no responsibility or discipline." You know? And midway, the sage says, "Stop, king. There's something you don't know." And the smiling sage is just there, incredibly calm, as if there is no longer a war left to fight. And so the sage looks at the king who was about to, dishonor the smiling disciple. And the sage says, "King, this man that you see here who is seated," and he says, "Oh, what happiness. He used to be a man who had armored guards around him. He used to be a man who had kingdoms. But he renounced that kingdom and came to the forest to see what true happiness is. And now he has found it." And the king is like pretty much with the same reaction Morpheus had when he saw Neo. The king is like, "All right." The king sits down and for the first time realizes that his crown is not his mask. That is a true king, where the king's crown also serves the king. The point is, true happiness is not just behavior. It is realizing the nature of the world you are in once. We are all equal. When it comes to wondering about the unknown, there is no one who can have a face. Alright guys, my attention has come to the chat section. Just keep in mind, I shared the story midway of explaining this chart, but I'm gonna respond to the chat section really quickly. Guys, any question you have, put MW in front of it, and my attention knows that that's something you want the speaker to respond to. Okay, David Rodriguez, I agree with you. I call that that apocalypse is the apocalypse of the linguistic simulation. It's not the end of the world. It is the end of the idea of man's world. This doesn't mean the human ideal is being forgotten. That means I am here on one angle looking at people who think they're objects and being like, really? And looking at people who think they're subjects and being like, really? And then looking at myself who thinks he's a thought and being like, really? And there, that stillness of nature is the ultimatum. That is the true teaching of the collective unconscious. That means we only fear because of our scale of belief. That means if you were suddenly, right now you are a person in a universe, but now imagine your eyes, your mind was the whole universe and the person was in your view. So this is a good point to dive into the archetypes, you know. And if I miscommunicate something here, Carl Jung, forgive me. Excuse me. Very quickly, in the chat section, a question has come. Any thoughts on Yuji Krishnamurti? He knows what he's doing, but you'll never think he does. Yuji Krishnamurti, not Jiddu. That's fine. But he is. I like his attitude, because for him, he is doing something where literally anybody who touches language, he's like, no, stop touching it. Stop touching everything. Anything you say to him, he's literally like a bulldozer, like a printer shredder, you know, like a paper shredder destroying it. So that's my view on Yuji Krishnamurti. He's a unique algorithm that's responding to the linguistic simulation. Okay, now. Okay, let's give an example, guys. I want to do justice to the title. God's unknown presence. God's unknown presence would be intelligent movement that we can't comprehend. That could be potential for it. The conscious psyche is a suggestion that the body is a candle, the mind is a candle flame, the psyche is the light. It's the light that's illuminated. It's the candela of consciousness. You know? So, what does that mean? That means the conscious psyche is by the nature, the moment we use the word psyche, limited. The word conscious, it's limited. Now, psyche, I would say the best thing we can say about it is unknown. So when we wonder about our conscious mind, we're wondering about limitations in an unknown moment. Carl Jung spoke about the unconscious. Think of the unconscious. Think as if you're in a forest and you've set up camp. Okay, think as if you and 8 billion of your friends have gone to a forest, you've set up a camp, and you're sitting there. Now, this forest is so big, and it's dark at night, and we only have the campfire, you know? And it's as if suddenly we find different creatures, like a bear appears from the forest, you know, an extraterrestrial appears from the forest, the idea of the logos appears from the forest, you know, the fantasy and science fiction modalities arise from the forest, this unknown, relationship with the unknown. So I would say it's kind of like fishing in the unknown. The conscious identity is fishing for a truth before itself or beyond itself. That means really there's two ways out of language, out of duality. Either through the singular void, that's one exit, or through the infinite void. Infinity or the singular are the exits, both leading to the void. Carl Jung speaks about the persona, where you see he's showing the ego. Let me zoom in on this. So you see the persona, it is the surface, it is the mask. So right now, who people think or I wouldn't use the term think, but in people's inner realms, how I am a person, that's my persona. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That's the surface of who you guys think I am. You know, and let me tell you how mysterious we are. I have, in some sense, the moment I saw we were beyond language, there is no language that can contain what the human being is. We are as unknown as the universe. So anyways, we started from persona. Okay, we started, that's where we're starting the mask, right? The persona is bound to duality. It's filled with stories, do you know? A lot of human suffering is subjective, and it's because of the persona is not what they expected, you know? The persona, the best image you can have for it is those two theatrical masks of the crying face and the smiling face, those two masks. I would say that is, to me, like, or the persona. A very incredible example of it. Personal unconscious. A metaphor for it. Then we go to the personal unconscious. What does that mean? Okay, this is where I gotta infuse my own eyes with what Jung is saying. I consider in front of the eyes again, outer realms. Behind the eyes, inner realms. Now, how we are an individual to ourself, our I thought. Alan Watts explains the ego as just consciousness to a thought of self. That means if you think you're a good guy, that's the ego you have at the moment. If you think you're a bad guy, that's the ego you have at the moment. If you think you're a simple person, that's the ego you have at the moment. If you think you're a complex person, that's the ego. That's the self evoked and being worn like Iron Man suit at the moment, being allowed to be animated as behavior. Now, the personal unconscious means that there is... it means first we are a self, then we can identify a world. That means there is self before world. The self is the personal experience. When I use the term qualia, that's inner experience. It's kind of like Immanuel Kant talked about it in front of your eyes. You have phenomenon. All that imagination, memory, visualization, sound evoking into image, all of that in the inner realms is noumenon. That's how Immanuel Kant spoke about it. Phenomena that only exists to the inner experiencer. This is why when you sit on a bus, you know, the person beside you can't see your thoughts. Can you, can you imagine there was an app in the future, you know? Or imagine at night, we had this thing occurring where at night on buses, okay, let's say late at night on buses in bad neighborhoods, there was a sort of technology that it had made it enforceable by law to have your thoughts be seen. So imagine there was a sort of hologram mandate where every person after like 12 a.m., after midnight, their thoughts have to be visible. So if you go in a bus and there's like, you know, something that seems unsettling to you, you can see the thoughts of that part of the bus. You know what I mean? It's like thoughts become revealed. The mind's content, the inner realms, that thing that's now limited, it becomes open. I could see this in the future in a sci-fi setting, of course. But anyways, so we go to the personal conscious, the personal unconscious, then we have the collective conscious and the collective unconscious. So we have PC, we have PC, PU, then we have or let me say it like this. We have PC, then PU, then we have sorry guys, let me just... Okay, I'm saying there's two dimensions. One side of the coin, we're a person. One side of the coin, we're a collective. Okay? So the side that is a person, that is individual, where individualism is beginning, there is a sort of consciousness to that and an unconsciousness to that. Now we have the collective conscious and the collective unconscious. So simply said, it would be what you know and what you don't know, what your world knows and what your world doesn't know. And the cool thing is that what you don't know and what your world doesn't know is the same. This is why when it gets to the collective, you see how it's like the collective unconscious is coming to the center where there's the self or God image. And earlier with you I shared the idea where Carl Jung says, where is it? Where Carl Jung says God is an infinite sphere. He's saying that alchemists say this, but it's like we can quote Jung on it. On this, Jung says God is an infinite sphere, the center of which is everywhere, the circumference nowhere. That means that the center. This is why I say the presence of your attention is beyond. It's not God's unknown. It's the unknown's God. Do you know? Excuse me. I said that wrong. It's the unknown's God. It's the unknown's God. So first we're treating ourselves as a known entity in a known relationship with psychic complex, autonomous psychic complexes, kind of being washed ashore, the shore of our conscious mind. The individual is the mind's gift to the attention of the moment. The collective is the world's gift. And both require to be opened before ejecting from the plane of existence or piloting beyond ideological servitude. Now, there is more to the archetypes. So we were at the persona, the mask. We're like, who's wearing this mask? We found the personal unconscious. Sorry. We noticed the I thought, the cultural program-based ethnocentric kind of self-simulated idea of you. And even the ego is telling us to go, Then we go to the personal unconscious. From the personal unconscious, you're required to acknowledge your shadow. To acknowledge your shadow is, I remember hearing Jordan Peterson speaking about, if you don't confront your shadow, you stop evolving with your world. That means if the person thinks they are some perfect statue of their own conception 24/7, then you stop living. It's only the unknown that is really can have the certainty of an unknown world. The known will always feel uncertain. That means your unknown self knows more about an unknown world than your known self. So, in some sense, being led from the conscious self to the unconscious self. Now, the shadow was an archetype. I should share another picture, if I can find it. Guys, it's hard looking for shadows at dawn. Sorry, not dawn. Dusk. Anyways. Guys, I can't find the picture, but it's a picture showing that a person is standing and there's a shadow to the person. And that shadow is covering their true self. It's hiding their true self. That means your views on how inefficient you are covering actually the efficient version of you. Oh, there we go. I found it. Nice. So guys, if you look at this picture, these are the 4 Jungian archetypes. You can say these are 4 phases that the mind should be able to experience as a member of civilization. We have the persona where I spoke about, then we came through the noticing of the personal unconscious, the shadow, you know. Now look at the shadow. You see how there's a light being shown, right? And this light is casting a shadow, and the shadow is hiding the real self. And you see how the guy's shadow has horns? This means that human beings shouldn't think they're just good ordered people and shouldn't think they're just chaotic animals. You know, we should realize that these are both modes. Just like you could put your phone in airplane mode or off, you know, you could turn on your Wi-Fi, turn it off. These are ways where you can turn off your morality and become a savage, chaotic animal. Or you can turn on your morality and suddenly wonder about the nature of why minds are here rather than just bodies desiring in the void. So once you can notice your shadow, I'm telling you, the person, there was this quote, Sufi quote, where it says, he who knows his devil knows his God. Sufi saying. And what it meant that he who has realized where the chaotic archetypes in the mind dwell and what is the nature of chaos, the person has realized that it's one side of the spectrum. It becomes no longer in need to glorify a changing phenomenon. So then the ultimate becomes changeless. Because it's changeless language, it goes beyond the language threshold. And the language threshold is a term I've created, guys. I'm telling you, this is the most important idea our species has. And I'm not saying just because I created it, because literally it's the edge of language. It's the edge of language. We've reached there. We've reached the edge of the linguistic simulation. Now we have to be driven towards the new design of language, and sometimes behaviors have to change. And how behaviors change is people telling themselves a different story because they deserve it. You know, Lao Tzu says you gotta let go of who you are now to be who you're meant to. For example, I've been giving these talks a while and I've been smoking in the middle, right? So eventually, probably, I don't know, in like a week or something, I'm going to like take a, you know, I don't know, maybe like a couple months off, you know, a year off or something from these talks. So I'm saying eventually things reach a point where the feedback readjusts the behavior. And that's nature, you know, it's like when you notice there's chaos and order and they're both members of the civilization, and the whole point of humanity is that we're putting freedom over ideological classification of value. That freedom means we have to care for where the human experience is arising, you know. The anima and the animus is that chaos and order, but through the cultural and personal dimension, you know. So, we come to the self or God image. Now, here's the cool thing. The collective unconscious, I have also called it in a book I wrote, which is not out yet. It's called The Inventor's Sphere. I wrote it in 2013. The Inventor's Sphere, I talk about this sphere where endless designs, endless inventions and designs for inventions are there. And when a being taps into that sphere, they endlessly find that. That sphere is the collective unconscious. That means when you become inspired by what everybody doesn't know, then you start breathing as a universal being. And it's refreshing. Okay, so Gong Sun. So you say, what do you mean when I say UG Krishnamurti? You asked me, do I agree with his opinions? And then I said there's nothing to agree to from his view. That means it's as if anything you say to him, it's as if he will call you a barking dog. Do you understand what I mean? That means he is doing a trick question. He's doing something intentionally. He's giving no room for the individual to be right. He's not. Let me tell you, I find what UG Krishnamurti is doing. He is treating language as an illusion, so he's trying to wake up people from it. I'm treating language as a technology. That the moment you see it's an illusion, you can use it. You can start using it, Imagine Tony Stark came home one day, and, Tony Stark's wife, and let's say you had kids or something, he was smart enough to have kids, And suddenly he comes home, Tony Stark in the Iron Man suit, and Tony Stark's wife is like, Tony, you gotta get out of that suit. You've been in there too long, And Tony's like, today I changed my name to Iron Man. Legally, I'm no longer Tony Stark. Call me Iron. And Tony Stark's wife is gonna be like, oh my God, Tony, what the fuck? And that's identification with language. If you think you're a character in a story, Tony Stark has confused himself with the Iron Man suit. If you realize you're not the Iron Man suit, you can step out of it any time. You can only step into it. You can animate into a linguistic creature only when required. You can hover. You can hover as just the whole moment. No thought. There's literally no point to any thought. They come and go. It's as if somebody telling you what is the meaning of a wind hitting the leaves of a tree. What is the purpose? What is the evolutionary purpose of wind hitting the leaves of a tree? What is the meaning of life for that? And you see, it's just nature, unknown before it needs to be known. That's the power of the mind. It keeps the mystery alive. Lies that bind says, like Buddha said, why are you acting so small? Yeah, there's a quote by Rumi. He says, you were born, a Sufi mystic poet 700 years ago, he says, you were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life? Think about that. Imagine you had wings, but you were crawling. Okay, you were crawling, and it was somebody with wings would be like, yo, why are you crawling? Don't you realize you're a mind yet? Don't you realize that free will is the once in a lifetime opportunity and golden ticket to, I don't know, the Willy Wonka, Pure Land of Mode, Mahayana Buddhism, Willy Wonka, Pure Land of Mode context. Guys, of course, I haven't. I would say something, Young Sun. I have heard maybe like a couple lectures from Yuji Krishnamurti, so I don't know that much. But there was one lecture where I was literally like an eagle zooming in to try to find what kind of world he's seeing behind his eye. But that's the thing. The mystery is called the mystery for a reason. That means it's kind of like I wondered, like, how could it be that all this time nobody has wondered how we have defined the word unknown in the dictionary? Can it be defined? If it can be defined, it becomes um, all you can eat. All you. It's like it becomes like a market of choose the god that fits your mind. You know. I would say the point is either the individual is in control and the world feels also in control. Either the individual doesn't consciously feel in control and the only way they've allowed themselves to change is by being unconscious. Steve says each state in spiral dynamics represents the ability to experience more perspective. In the chat section, Steve says there are definitely parallels to draw between this model and SD. Yeah, here's the thing. I thought of it this way. I thought like a lazy person. I'll be honest. I was like, okay, what is the most what is it? Let's say there's endless problems to solve on this planet, endless things you can do, endless ways you could look at it and then want to do something, you know. So let's say out of all these problems, what is the approach? Okay, what is the, like, literally, let's say you wanted to spend maybe 5 minutes to solve all your problems and then wonder about something else. How would you want in, like, in a short time? And then I realized, okay, so let me think. People are glorifying education. We have made so many branches of knowledge, right? But it's the same tree. So what does that mean? That means ultimately I will tell you the truth of the visible, observable realm is just creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. When you see that situation, it just becomes instant. Your view becomes instant. Yeah, what can 8 billion creatures do? They can only build something, they attempt their advancement just to see what it's like before, the curtains pull. So I would say when you try to solve a universal problem, you will get incredible insights in all the onion layer, inner onion layer, or Russian doll kind of dimensions. That means, I'll give you an example, right? Let's say we have cultural discrimination, okay, as a problem. Now, some people are like, yeah, cultural discrimination, how do we solve it? Let's see, what is the discrimination? I attempt the problem differently. I say, what would culture mean if we were right now, thousands of years ahead, and we had become galactic, that we had suddenly seen an evolution from a city into a jumping city, into a sky city, into a spaceship, into an interstellar civilization. That means when we speak about an interstellar civilization, it's not just having like a tiny bit of real estate in space, you know? So when we look at it on that level, you just laugh. You're like, oh my God. Human beings have been, and you see how in this picture, every one of these characters is in their own energy field? That has been what has been going on. And I don't know how many people know what this picture is from, but I do. I don't know how accurate I can explain it though. I would explain it this way. You see the character in the middle that has the golden aura, the golden energetic aura? That character is the future. That means, and that character you see in the back in the sky with the circle, that is the past. And these two in the story, Goku and Vegeta, these two are rebels. They are each other's antimatter. Do you know? They are because they are each other's chaos and order. Do you know? That means they are technically one being. You know, they're representations, archetypes of the psyche of one being. So Vegeta is the one who he gives into chaos first. Goku doesn't. So the implementation, the suggestion I would say of this picture is that once chaos and order are not fighting each other, they are looking at the future. The future can conquer the past. But when chaos and order fight each other in the present, then it's a waste of time. The future is alone in the battlefield. So I would say what this suggests is that suddenly imagine there were leaders popping up on the planet, you know, human leaders, and leaders of evil institutions and good institutions, old school way we would see them. Okay? And the leaders of chaos were like giving a command to all chaotic beings. Only run and serve the advanced civilization. And imagine all the leaders of all the ordered and good beings in the universal sector. They were given a command, build the future. You know, advanced civilization. It would be for the first time as if what is the best way chaos and order can fight? Even in the whole, this is based on a Japanese comic book, this picture, but I would say the whole Dragon Ball Z narrative is that these two fight each other when there is not an enemy outside hurting the world. When somebody hurts the world, the chaos and order of this turf defend it, right? And I could be definitely too deeply looking into this picture, which I feel I am, but there was also something in this Japanese narrative, this concept called ultra instinct. And the movement and knowing prior to this, like maybe 3 nanosecond simulation of thought. That means I would tell you we are thinking because right now the progress of the outer realms is slower than the inner realms. But I will tell you, if the outer realms was changing quicker than the inner realms would be a mind. Literally, when the moment can't be a body anymore, it's like, oh my god, I gotta be mind now. Like the moment becomes like a field, you know. I'm telling you, the mind is it has never stopped its invisible walk. It's just that it's wearing the sunglasses, visible biological sunglasses. You know. Guys, for those listening, I'm gonna attempt to I'm gonna try doing this more often. I'm gonna post the songs that I'm listening to. So I would recommend people who care for these talks of mine. You can click on this song, open it in a new tab, play it in the background while I'm speaking. You know, it's the song I'm listening to on headphones as I speak. I would say when it comes to psychology and when it comes to just knowledge in general, I mean, this is a basic question everyone should ask. Is there an end to knowledge? And you see no. That means if you declare this world as an educational planet, it becomes endless. You have endless reason to desire the same thing. It's like a person drinking from a river and wondering why their stomach is hurting after eons, you know? Guys, I want to read some quotes from Carl Jung, and I think that will be very helpful to the talk. Carl Jung says the ancients called the saving word, the logos, an expression of divine reason. So much unreason was in man that he needed reason to be saved. If one waits long enough, one sees how the gods all change into serpents and underworld dragons in the end. This is also the fate of the logos. In the end, it poisons us all. In time, we were all poisoned, but unknowingly we kept the powerful one, the eternal wonder in us away from the poison. We spread poison and paralysis around us in that we want to educate all the world around us into reason. Yeah. The Sufis would say to just look at life only through an intellectual dimension is in some sense whipping a dead donkey to go faster, to run faster. That means there's a lifelessness to it that is like I find the poison Carl Jung is suggesting. This is from the Red Book, these quotes, guys. Carl Jung says, man doesn't only grow from within himself, for he is also creative. From within himself, capital T, capital G, the God becomes revealed in him. Human nature is little skilled in divinity, and therefore man fluctuates between too much and too little. Carl Jung says, man doesn't only grow from within himself, for he's also... Oh, sorry, I read that. Selfish desire ultimately desires itself. You find yourself in your desires, so do not say that desire is vain. If you desire yourself, you produce the divine Son in your remembrance with yourself. Your desire is the father of the God. Yourself is the mother of the God, but the Son is the new God, your master. Carl Jung says, you say, the Christian God is unequivocal, he is love. But what is more ambiguous than love? Love is the way of life, but your love is only on the way of life if you have a left and a right. Carl Jung says, everything that becomes too old becomes evil. The same is true of your highest. Learn from the suffering of the crucified God that one can also betray and crucify a God, namely the God of the old year. If a God ceases being the way the zenith, he must fall secretly. The God becomes sick if he oversteps the height of the zenith. That is why the spirit of the depths took me when the spirit of this time had led me to the summit. This is why the spirit of the depths took me when the spirit of this time had led me to the summit. Okay. Everything he's saying in this passage makes sense if you see the self as God, because it's something you can do. When he says the spirit of the depths took me when the spirit of the time had led me to the summit, it was as if the conscious mind was at the edge of modernity, but then the unconscious mind, as if like pulled Carl Jung back into I would say the ancient, the archaic. You know, that means think of it this way. This is a very unique idea, but think of I shared it like this in one talk. We have the atom as the smallest particle. We have what I call the eventum. The eventum is the smallest unit of the psyche, you know, through a psychological observation of the realm. That means just like how an atom is made from subatomic particles, the psyche is made from subatomic events. And that means one moment can have the influences of a bunch of other events that have nothing to do with that framework, you know. So it could be that there is endless veils and we're just navigating through these. And so that's when you feel like there is, even Carl Jung said he felt he was taken to the depth, you know. Carl Jung says, but the supreme meaning is the path, the way, and the bridge to what is to come. That is the God yet to come. It is not the coming God himself, but his image which appears in the supreme meaning. God is an image, and those who worship him must worship him in the images of the supreme meaning. The supreme meaning is not a meaning and not an absurdity. It is image and force in one. It is image and force in one. Magnificence and force together. It is image. So image is unknown design, and force is you can only know it. So I would say, I think it's the inseparability of the personal conscious and the collective unconscious. Carl Jung says the supreme meaning is the beginning and the end. It is the bridge of going across and fulfillment. Carl Jung says the divine primordial power is blind, since its face has become human. The human is the face of the Godhead. If the God comes near you, then plead for your life to be spared, since the God is loving heart. The ancients said, it is terrible to fall into the hands of the living God. They spoke thus because they knew, since they were still close to the ancient forest, and they turned green like the trees in a childlike manner and descended far away toward the east. Okay, I have no idea what to say about that. Okay. There is something interesting. He says that the human is the face of the Godhead. I think that's a very important statement. That's a very like brave statement from us uh, that's a very that's an important statement. Anyways, Carl Jung says the spirit of this time, of course, allowed me to believe in my reason. He let me see myself in the image of a leader with ripe thoughts, but the spirit of the depths teaches me that I am a servant, in fact, the servant of a child. This dictum was repugnant to me, and I hated it, but I had to recognize and accept that my soul is a child and that my God in my soul is a child. Wow. I mean, that's definitely Carl Jung. Yeah. Carl Jung says the god of words is cold and dead and shines from afar like the moon, mysteriously and inaccessibly. Let the word return to its creator, to man, and thus the word will be heightened in man. Man should be light, limits, measure. Wow. Carl Jung says man shall differentiate himself both from spirituality and sexuality. He shall call spirituality mother and set her between heaven and earth. He shall call sexuality phallus and set him between himself and earth. For the mother and the phallus are superhuman daemons that reveal the world of the gods. They affect us more than the gods since they are closely akin to our essence. Archetypes. He was talking about the archetypes, guys. Keep that in mind. These are psychic complexes. This is pretty much like an alphabet of image before your eyes was an eyes that was influencing everything, potentially. Carl Jung says, I believe that we have the choice. I prefer the living wonders of the God. I daily weigh up my whole life, and I continue to fiery brilliance of the God as a higher and fuller life than the ashes of rationality. The ashes are suicide to me. I could perhaps put out the fire, but I cannot deny to myself the experience of the God, nor can I cut myself off from this experience. I also do not want to, since I want to live. My life wants itself whole. All these quotes are from Carl Jung's The Red Book, guys. Carl Jung says we must presumably often go to ourselves to reestablish the connection with the self, since it is torn apart all too often, not only by our vices, but also by our virtues. For vice as well as virtues always wants to live outside. But through constant outer life, we forget the self, and through this we also become secretly selfish in our best endeavors. What we neglect in ourselves blends itself secretly into our actions towards others. Through uniting with the self, we reach God. Carl Jung says man is a gateway through which you pass from the outer world of gods. Excuse me, I'll read that again. Man is a gateway through which you pass from the outer world of gods, daemons, and souls into the inner world, out of the greater into the smaller world. Small and inane is man. Already he is behind you, and once again you find yourselves in endless space, in the smaller or inner infinity. In some talks, guys, I've talked about, I didn't call it inner infinity, but I've called it hollow infinities. These hollow infinities is an example of if you could look, imagine two people were standing in front of one another, but you could look from both people's eyes. What that perception would occur to you would be a hollow infinity. Carl Jung says, the prophet loved God and this sanctified him, but Salome did not love God and this profaned her, but the prophet did not love Salome and this profaned him. Okay. It's like Carl Jung has to notice some speed bumps on the road, you know. Carl Jung says, I am the egg that surrounds and nurtures the seed of the God in me. Challenge accepted. When Carl Jung says, I am the egg that surrounds and nurtures the seed of the God in me, there is this metaphor. They say if the egg breaks from the inside, there is life. If the egg breaks from the outside, there isn't life. So you can say Carl Jung is nurturing, his psychology, his outer, his persona is the egg that's nurturing the seed of the life within this contained persona and selfhood. So that means Carl Jung is treating his ego as an egg in this quote. I would say it would for the first time be E-G-G-G-O, ego. So that word could be how ego and the ego is like an egg, If from a sincere inner source, the moment becomes animate, there is way more, I would say, it's like you have two choices. Either you move your life or life moves you. The egg breaking from the outer realms, that's allowing life to move you only. I would say one should see life as a communication. In communication, there is like the one person says something, and like a baseball throws the communication to another person. That person grabs it, adds some things to it, and throws it back. So it's an interaction. It's a living, dynamic relationship. So it's like restoring the relationship with Earth, but as advanced communicators and designers. Pretty much it's like all the engineers in the world suddenly, went to speak to the druids, Carl Jung says, into what mist and darkness does your path lead? I limp after you on crutches of understanding. I'm a man and you stride like a god. I am a man and you stride like a god. Carl Jung says, I am ignorant of your mystery. Forgive me if I speak as in a dream, like a drunkard. Are you God? Carl Jung says, no one has my God, but my God has everyone. Carl Jung says, your voice is too weak for those raging to be able to hear. Thus do not speak and do not show the God, but sit in a solitary place and sing incantations in the ancient manner. Carl Jung says, you have the one God and you become your one God in the innumerable number of gods. Carl Jung says, you are the suffering heart of your one-star God, who is Abraxas to his world. Okay, so guys, this is I never knew this word existed. Hold on. It's like, there we go. Scrape or wear. Oh, a braid. Why is it? Oh, it's the derivation of the word abrade, maybe. Scrape or wear away by friction or erosion. So Carl Jung's saying, you're the suffering heart of your one-star God who is scraping and eroding to its world. Anyways. Carl Jung says, who exhausts the mystery of love? There are those who love there are those who love man, and those who love the souls of man, and those who love their own soul. Such a one is Philemon, the host of the gods. Guys, there's one more step Carl Jung is missing. You love your own soul as the soul of mankind. That's the thing I think maybe Carl Jung brings it up later. Carl Jung says, you shall call me if you want to live with men, but the one God if you want to rise above the human world to the divine and eternal solitude of the star. Okay. Carl Jung says, here the soul drew near to my ear and whispered, the gods are even happy to turn a blind eye from time to time, since basically they know very well that it would be bad for life if there were no exception to eternal law, hence their tolerance of the devil. Carl Jung says, just as the disciples of Christ recognized that God had become flesh and lived among them as man, we now recognize that the anointed of this time is a God who does not appear in the flesh. He is no man and yet is a son of man, but in spirit and not in flesh. Hence he can be born only through the spirit of men as the conceiving womb of the God. Carl Jung is going, he's piloting to heights that I have no clue how to. Carl Jung says, one is the beginning, the sun god. Two is Eros, for he binds two together and spreads himself out in brightness. Three is the tree of life, for it fills space with bodies. Four is the devil, for he opens all that is closed. He dissolves everything formed and physical. He is the destroyer in whom everything becomes nothing. I would say it's just the notion of unconscious infinitude. That's the archetype of, I would say, four. What does that mean? That means it's a dualistic loop, which technically can appear as a hollow infinity. Carl Jung says, on the night when I considered the essence of the God, I became aware of an image. I lay in a dark depth. An old man stood before me. He looked like one of the old prophets. A black serpent lay at his feet. Some distance away I saw a house with columns. A beautiful maiden steps out of the door. Guys, this is the Red Book by Carl Jung is a book where this very professional psychologist spread out all his he gave himself full permission to share his interrupts. So keep that in mind. You know, this is we're pretty much listening to the howls of Carl Jung's soul on paper. You know, Carl Jung says, on the night when I considered the essence of the God, I became aware of an. Oh no, I read that. Sorry. And guys, when I say howl, as in he's like one of the early people who realized the unknown, the potential of it in regards to the conscious individual. In the renewed world, you can have no outer possessions unless you create them out of yourselves. You can enter only into your own mysteries. The spirit of the depths has other things to teach you than me. I only have to bring you tidings of the new God and of the ceremonies and mysteries of his service, but this is the way. It is the gate to darkness. It is the gate to darkness, the void done on. Oh my God. Carl Jung says, my soul is my supreme meaning, my image of God, neither God himself nor the supreme meaning. God becomes apparent in the supreme meaning of the human community. I'm going to read one more quote, guys. He says, "For in the first instance, the God's power resides entirely in the self, since the self is completely in the God. Because we were not with the self." So, for in the first instance, the God's power resides entirely in the self, since the self is completely in the God. Yeah. So yeah, that means because self is in God, God is in self. Because we were not with the self, that means, okay, God was in the room first. We must draw the self to our side, find an allegiance with your mind. Therefore, we must wrestle with the God for the self, since the God, we must wrestle with the God for the self, since the God is an unfathomable, powerful movement that sweeps away the self into the boundless, into dissolution. Wow. Yeah, we gotta pretty much create boundaries. That means, I would say, in the outer realms, it's a spherical earth. In the inner realms, poetically, it's like a flat earth. You reach the edge of it and you can't go. It's like the movies, like where there was a ship at the edge of the world, of this two-dimensional flat world, where the ship just like flew into outer space. You know, the edge of the world was just a waterfall into the void. You know, that's pirate mythology for you folks. So, folks. So, anyways, I guess I can end it with that. Oh my God, Carl Jung, he says this other quote. He says we must heal ourselves from the God, since he is also our heaviest wound. Carl Jung says it is certainly possible and even quite easy for a reason to deny the God and to speak only of sickness. Thus we accept the sick part and can also heal it, but it will be a healing with loss. We lose a part of life. We go on living, but as once lamed by the God, where the fire blazed, dead ashes lie. Where the fire blazed, dead ashes lie. I think, here's the thing. Carl Jung was too mature for language, so it could have been that suddenly the pressure of the realm set him, and it tends to be that one can. If the God is an imposition of yourself, you require to free yourself from it. If the God is not an imposition of yourself, there's no one to even be able to even have the narrative of being able to free itself. And I would say Carl Jung's Red Book, it's a very, I will tell you, you know what it is? His book is like an artifact from the future. This book, Carl Jung's Red Book, imagine in the future we have true philosophers, and everybody should have the honor to leave the idea there. But imagine different colors to the book. You know, somebody writes the blue book. I actually made a note midway through the talk to write something called the Starlight Blue Book. Yeah. To honor like the tradition, Carl Jung's tradition. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. I'll be in the Discord section for a little bit for those interested. So, and one thing to say, I wrote something in the subtitle. Intellectualizing the abyss. Yeah, what do we do with that problem? What do we do with nothingness in the middle of everything we want? Eyes have opened. A world is accessible. The inner interpretation of the outer world is only accessible in accordance to the type of self you wield. You know, it may be a strange idea, but I would say it's kind of sometimes style finds eternal beauty in the past, and I feel that there was a time that men on this planet had swords. People literally walk with swords. Now we should treat our minds, our intelligence, as if we are wielding in the moment. What kind of sense of self are we wielding in the moment? You know? And you can say nirvana, moksha, that was like enlightenment was like pulling out Excalibur. When the human being found a significance of the inner and outer that were being witnessed in a singular moment. That singularity of all being is really nature's language. It's now nature speaks. That means I would say if man speaks through movement and noise, nature speaks through silence and stillness. And so really when I say God's unknown presence in the conscious psyche, I'm talking about the unknown witnessing prime mover to the moment that is the unique stance of consciousness. I am saying not enough people are wondering about their own attention and not realizing it's honestly like an instrument. Nobody has your DNA, so nobody can wonder about the true nature of your eyes. But I feel inevitably once the self reaches a point where it wonders, what's my purpose as an individual? The only way you're an individual is because you have seen the collective first and you've separated from it. So I would say it's the great collective future return of the species. There's no. And to intellectualize the abyss, the best thing we can do is just add to the database, just build giant archives of human perception, views, points of view, rather having endless discrimination. That means any human being that comes up with a new idea, instead of the person being ridiculed as if, oh my God, why did you say that? Instead, the person should be, okay, something's being added. The species has found more, like, you know, is adding more hexagons to the hive. So you see, we have to, I would say, for the first time, use our free will honestly to until a point where honor is found. When you find honor, you begin trusting your being. When you trust your being, then you become, you know that moment, Uncle Ben? Imagine, like, Spider-Man went to a store getting an Uncle Ben, like, soup, and suddenly, like, you know, he sees Uncle Ben in that soup, and he's like, with great power comes great responsibility, you know? And so in that moment, he thinks weeks ahead and buys, like, 10 cans of soup, you know? But what I'm trying to say is that be a friend to the unknown, whatever it is. Whatever way your mind animates to you, or if there is, you know, from a theosophical angle, other phenomena behind the veil of perception, whatever it is, you not only existence is your turf, but experience is the commands of your nature. That means what is strange is that we are born here on earth, but why is there so much doubt? We are natural beings, right? When I look at nature, I don't see the squirrel, being like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my taxes? What am I going to do with my, future? The squirrel is just jumping, da 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 da. The squirrel doesn't, it's momentary lifehood. Do you know? Now imagine we connected an incredibly advanced technology to that squirrel, and that squirrel's head connected to some advanced AI, and that squirrel suddenly began being the first squirrel to win a Nobel Prize. Do you know what I mean? So what it is when it's purely natural, there is no meaning. Nature is just an event happening. It's like, what's the purpose of like a waterfall? About this wallpaper, this was really a picture from a show when I was a little kid, like, I don't know, 7 years old or something. 8 years old. It's like I would watch this show, and I remember it's like, we don't want to just live in our own image, because if we did, there would be no inclination for society. But because something makes, I would say, solitude, the feeling of loneliness is very, very divine. It's where the person realizes their true feelings for their world. And I can tell you, in certain states of solitude and certain states where the person is like, okay, I can't push this building of life karmically anymore, and the person just stops, doesn't give up. The person doesn't give up, the person just stops. And I will tell you, in certain moments where you just stop, you just practice inaction. Do you know your mind will have tears of joy? Because for the first time, the ears of nature have been found. That means, I will tell you, nature is the true teacher. And when man names nature, he forgets where he came from. And that's inner extinction. That means the moment we stop seeing trees outside, we'd be like, okay, something's going on. Imagine back in the future, like a couple hundred years from now, kids in like sky cities, let's say 600 years from now, children, and okay, 2,000 years from now, okay, children in sky cities are reading like in the history books of like like, whoa, there used to be trees on Earth? Like, can you imagine trees being the mythology of the future generations? That would be inner extinction. That would mean we stopped our relationship with our world. So when the species breaks up with the world, then it has lost its home. It's an inner home, I would say. Because right now, because it's so abundant and the earth is here and everything is perfect, everybody's super chill. Yeah, all you can eat buffet, everybody run. Like looking at the economies of this world. But I'll tell you, it's like this world, I don't know, but I think it's a privilege to realize you are a mind and then realize, wow, from the beginning, the world's mind is here. But it doesn't communicate through language. It is the mover of it. So if you think the words are the meaning, wrong. It's what's moving the words that is the truth. It is not the ego or the self that is the truth. It is what's moving that in the moment that is the true unknown. So I would say, I started off saying the title is God's Unknown Presence in the Conscious Psyche. I'm going to actually change it, The Unknown's Gods. The the unknown's God presence in the conscious. Yeah, I'm going to change the title to that. That means this title has two names, guys. Those who saw it live will remember. Unknown's God presence. There we go. And the best thing I would say about this picture is that all forces of nature are like joining allegiances to fight against time. I would say that is the true battlefield. It's the mystery. That means think as if there were endless. Okay, I'll give you an example. Imagine there was a parallel reality where on all the other planets there were civilizations except Earth. Okay, imagine. Do you know? In a parallel universe, you know? And so all these civilizations had modes and views and philosophies of what is the truth of reality, what is the nature, what did you figure out, what did that planet figure out, you know? And each planetary sector contributing to the universal sector's mystery. So I would say all those ideas will reach this conclusion: unknown place, unknown emergence into the experience of object locality, and from this object locality, flights into the inner sky. And guys, it devastated me when okay, I wanted to make a joke, but yeah, there we go. I'll say one thing, guys. This episode has inspired me to, again, write the Starlight Blue Book. If it ever seems like I've forgotten to write that book, people can remind me. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste. And I would say, if I were to write the Starlight Blue Book, the ultimate command and probably in the epigraph would just be these three words: rise, mankind.